Hi, this is a Physical Games with a Purpose Spring 2016 final wrap up video. So this quarter, a lot of our motivation was to look at feedback systems and how could we give a user feedback for their actions. One thing that was important to think about is we didn't want to spend a lot of time developing this tech to give accurate feedback without testing the design of it first. One thing that we realized we could do is we could actually fake feedback pretty well. If we wanted a user to know if a user jumped, we could just look for changes in accelerometer data. And if we wanted to have a user do an action that was difficult to sense, like tracing the outline of a tree's shadow, we could just ask the user to tell us if they did it by saying Roger that into the microphone. So these were a lot of things we were looking at this quarter. How can we fake feedback but still convince the user that the system knows what they're doing, enough to create an enjoyable experience?
Okay, since we talked about our research motivations, we can now talk about the questions that surround that research. Throughout this quarter, we spent a lot of time brainstorming and trying to fine tune what exactly our research questions were, and we went through many iterations throughout this quarter. Near the beginning of the quarter, we had research questions that were uh, very driven by our motivations that we thought were our motivations, such as how can we utilize object affordances to facilitate natural interaction with the user's environment. Uh, that kind of gets at the whole affordance aware computing system idea, and how can we leverage that ability to better the crowdsourcing atmosphere, which is also what gets into the second question: what motivates users to interact with their environment to support crowdsourced data collection. Uh, Both of those did drive our process for the first half of the quarter, even though the research questions aren't necessarily the most well formatted. Uh, they gave us kind of a goal to prove out this afforance of our computing system. But as we got towards the second half of the quarter, we kind of fine tuned our research questions into one in particular, and it's is course feedback effective at increasing enjoyability by giving the illusion a system can sense a user's action. Uh, so what's getting at here is seeing uh, how motivation plays a factor in how well a user is able to complete tasks. So our theory is that feedback would enhance a person's motivation to complete a crowdsourcing task. And our theory is that with physical games, unlike other types of feedback systems, the feedback can be very imprecise. In fact, you can only use coarse feedback from what you're given from the phone, and that coarse feedback alone is enough to motivate the user enough to continue playing games. Uh, so with our research questions, I guess this is kind of before also we had our need finding from last quarter. A lot of what we saw was that users were confused because there was no feedback at all, and had less motivation to complete these actions because there was no right or wrong. There was no you should do this. There was no you should do that. It was just all on the quote unquote honor system, which led to very low motivation to complete tasks to their full extent. So that's kind of what gets back to research question three, is showing that feedback itself helps with motivation, and course feedback is all you need for physical gaming. Uh, we'll briefly talk about our contributions. Conceptual, we have this very overarching idea of building this world of affordances and conditions. And with this world, we are mapping experiences onto the world in ways that provide novel physical afforance-aware interactions for users within physical environments. So that's kind of wordy, but basically what it's saying is because we're able to map the world based on these X, Y, Z conditions and affordances, we're able to better uh, define the world around them through computer settings. And based on those settings, we can target users to complete tasks in ways that we had no way of doing beforehand. Uh, and as proof, we have our system contribution, PGAP, a proof of concept that shows afforance-aware computing is effective at creating enjoyable gameplay by accurately extrapolating and understanding the world from environmental data. Uh, so this is basically our proof of concept showing that using the affordanceAware computing system helps develop these crowdsourcing systems or even gaming systems that target user environments easily, because not much needs to be done besides creating the content. The overarching system's already there, which is our technical contribution. We built an architecture that uses coarse phone sensors and object affordances mappings to create an understanding of the world just good enough to allow for novel interactions and motivation factors such as feedback to be built. Basically, what it's saying is this architecture can be used more or less anywhere to allow for this affordanceAware type of computing system, saying that this framework, this architecture, allows for any technology to leverage the mappings that the world around a user already has. Okay, so here we see our PGAP system in action. Basically, we're going to show off the different types of affordance object pairings and how feedback can play a role in motivating a user to complete these games. So one thing we should note is that a lot of the games and motif and the physical descriptions of the games have stayed the same, but what's different is our object affordances mappings. So here we see Jennie playing a game that requires her to traverse the shadow of an object in the case of a tree. One thing to note is that this game is not associated directly to the tree, but rather to objects that cast shadows. So after completing the game, she rogers into her microphone that she's successful, and the game cues an audio successful message. Here's another game where Jennie has to stomp on the enemy base headquarters, which is underneath this manhole cover, and after stomping, our feedback system sees she's successful and continues on with the game. Here's another system game where after Jennie stands for a certain period of time, the system sees that she is standing and delivers her positive message, and she continues on with the game. So we have many different games, and basically what we're showing is that there are so many different object affordances mappings that we can create, and by not tying games to specific objects, we can expand the universe essentially and motivate the user better to keep on playing. Furthermore, using our feedback system, we can see that the user is more motivated to continue on playing and is more incentivized to actually complete the task correctly.
And we ended the quarter by doing a user test with 9 users to both test the design of our system and also to test the tech of the system to see how well it was our feedback system working. So when we looked at design, a few takeaways we found was that feedback could actually be faked really well. Users thought the system was smarter than it was. A couple times a user would fail when they did an action. So one example is a user was supposed to jump on a manhole cover. They were jumping, but the system wasn't registering their jump, and they were kind of frustrated when they got the failure message, and they thought, oh, maybe this was the wrong manhole cover. Maybe they were referring to that manhole cover over there. So they blamed themselves before they blamed the system. Another example is after a user completed a task, they had to say Roger that into the microphone, and users thought they had to say the word Roger for the system to recognize it, when really the system was just looking for any noise at all. So this feedback was really promising. We also found that the biggest joy moments that happened during user testing was when a user did an action correctly and got positive feedback from the system. That was really exciting to them to have the system recognize they had done something. Also, because of the way we set up the system to queue games based on affordances, this meant that different games could be played on multiple objects, and the same games could be played on a wide variety of objects, which led to greater versatility in gameplay. However, the problem with this was we had a problem where we kept getting manhole cover games over and over and over, since so many games could be played on manhole covers. So another fix we need to make is figuring out how to design the system so you don't get repeated objects or repeated similar actions in the games. One thing we've been continuing to struggle with that we again saw in this user testing was that the storyline wasn't memorable. It didn't stick out to users. They remembered the actions and the objects and where they did the actions, but if asked what the storyline was or why they were supposed to be doing the action in the game, they just didn't remember. So definitely something we need to rethink. In terms of the tech, so we looked to see when a user was supposed to jump. One, did they jump? We observed that either by literally observing them or by asking them later, like, did you do the action? And relying on their feedback to be correct. And then second, we looked at, okay, did the system think they jumped? Yes or no? And we did this for not just jumping, but for standing and voice feedback as well. And then we looked at the false positive and false negatives. And so the system was actually correct about 70% of the time, but it was wrong 30% of the time. Having it right 70% of the time with such coarse feedback was a promising result. However, this 26% of the time when a user does the action, but the system doesn't recognize it, was really frustrating and confusing for users. They didn't know what to do. They're like, I did the action, but told me I didn't. Like, do I move on? Do I keep trying? And that led to confusion and frustration on the part of the user. If this happened too much or too early on, it was really disheartening. Another interesting thing we found was certain users were better at the game than others. So some users kept getting these false positives, following this 26%, whereas other users just kept getting positive. So it would be curious to look at why do certain users keep getting those false positives and why do they not understand how to perform the actions in a way that the system recognizes them, or how can we get the system to adjust to recognizing the actions of different users. What worked? The feedback system worked pretty well, especially when it was spot on. That created a lot of success and was commonly mentioned into what users enjoyed in the game. They were paying attention to how many games did they get correct, and trying to get the ratio of games they succeeded to games they failed as high as possible. Things that didn't work, again, the storyline, just users didn't pay attention to it. A few users mentioned that they liked the idea that there was a storyline and that they were part of something, but they didn't really remember what they were supposed to be a part of. Again, false positives were just really frustrating. That stood out as something that didn't work. Some of our next steps, we're really hoping to formalize the research and these design arguments and our contributions, be able to put those together in a paper. We also, right now, our code is pretty specific to our game. We want to generalize our code and turn it into an architecture that can be used to build other physical games. This will really allow us to do future user testing. That will show not that our specific system isn't, that these design arguments and claims aren't unique to our specific system, but apply to physical games in general. We thought about how we can rework our storyline. One thing we want to try is the idea of cutscenes. That's the way story video games do their storyline. So instead of having the user do the action while listening to a storyline, kind of separate those out and see if users are better able to follow the storyline and if that increases motivation. Lastly, we want to continue to create a sense of progress throughout the game, so a user, again, really feels like the storyline is something they're a part of and that they can follow it and succeed. Another thing that's really important is how can we eventually get this game to a place where it extracts data? Right now, we're working on getting it to a point where it can validate objects. So we think there's a tree here, but if a user never plays a game, whenever they're right near that tree, they never play the tree game, they always fail. Maybe that means there isn't a tree there, or for whatever reason, that tree is not a playable tree. We're also going to get to the point where we can collect new objects. We say, oh, hey, you're in an area where there might be a tree. Go play and see where a user finds a tree and where a user plays. We can gather data, oh, there is a tree there. So we're really excited to be able to do a big user study of 9 users this quarter and to see how well the feedback system actually did work. So sign off. Roger that, Bartley. See you.